Hey everyone, welcome back to Meant to Be Heard. This week's episode is a fascinating one. After years of unexplained health struggles and searching for answers that conventional medicine couldn't seem to provide, today's guest, Chintal Kakaya, found herself on a healing journey that eventually led her to a profound out-of-body experience that changed the course of her life forever. What began as a desperate search to understand what was happening in her body became a much deeper exploration of healing, consciousness, the mind-body connection, and what it truly means to come home to yourself. Today, Chintal combines over 20 years of experience as an occupational therapist with energy healing, nervous system regulation, somatic work, and spiritual practices to help others heal at the root level. Whether you're navigating health challenges of your own, or you're simply curious about the connection between science and spirituality, I think you're really going to enjoy this conversation. So, without further ado, let's get into my conversation with Chintal Kakaya. Chintal, welcome to Meant to Be Heard.
Thank you so much, Paige.
I'm very excited to have you. I have this theory. I feel like people who work in this space, people who are healers or light workers or just helping coach people or heal people in any way, they've had a spiritually transformative experience, something that shifted everything for them, changed everything that they couldn't unsee, and they had to move towards that. So I am excited to talk to you because that's exactly what you do. You work in this space and you're a healer and a coach and all that. And I'm excited to get into the work that you do, but I'm really excited to talk to you about your story. So where I love to start is pre-spiritual awakening, pre-spiritually transformative experience. What did Chintal's life look like? Walk us through life prior.
Wow. Yeah. So life prior to all of that was very much what I would say the norm that everyone goes through, your day-to-day job. So I'm a mom. At that point I had, both my kids. I'm a wife, daughter, daughter-in-law, all those titles that we play. And what life looked like was your usual, your Monday to Friday, you're going to work. And I've been in healthcare. I was in healthcare for over 20 years. So for me, it was go to work, go and do what I need to do, come home, then become mum mode. And
Okay.
that's literally what life was. It just felt like this cycle of doing, constant doing. You're doing one thing at work, you're coming home and you're doing another thing. And then when it's weekends, you're doing something else. And, life literally looked like, yes, I did enjoy my job, but I also felt really exhausted, really tired.
And when you say you were working in healthcare, what were you doing
Yeah.
in healthcare?
Yeah, so I worked in a couple of different settings. So I was a clinical occupational therapist. So I worked in hospital settings, but I also worked in I say community, but it was very much like a rapid response based community role that I was in. So what that looked like was as a senior assessor, a therapist who has advanced her skills where she's a little bit of a nurse, a little bit of a therapist, a little bit of a medic, and there's lots of different titles that come with it. So ultimately, my role was to assess patients in the community to ensure that it's safe enough to manage them in the community rather than them going into hospital. So it was a very hospital admission prevention role that I was in because,
Okay.
ultimately we do believe that your best recovery happens in your own home environment because you are surrounded
Mhm.
by things that are familiar. Bearing in mind, a lot of the times when I would be going out to see these patients, based on their age and stuff, a lot of them would have what we call cognitive impairment. So things are Alzheimer's, dementia, or onset of those situations. Because sometimes that's the reason why a referral would also come through, because family would phone and say to the GP or to a healthcare practitioner that, oh, my mom or my dad is presenting with X, Y, Z, and this is really out of character for them, or they've left the door open and they've wandered out, or they've left the gas on. So we're going out and really doing like a full-on assessment, like a very in-depth assessment on their physical ability. So physical functional assessment, their emotional psychological as well. So we're looking at their mental capacity, their ability to function in their own home, but also big part of it was the safety part, but then physically the symptoms that they're presenting with, is it requiring medical attention? And if it's needing medical attention, then I'd be the one liaising with the general practitioner. Or if it needs further intervention, it will be like, I'll be liaising with the consultants in the hospital in A&E. So there's a lot of
Hmm.
communication that goes on as well. But
Right.
ultimately the goal is, or the goal at that point was, how to best manage that individual safely, but in their best interest. But you can imagine that's quite challenging because sometimes you're on your own and in the patient's house, and you're then faced with a lot of different challenges. So you are constantly feeling under pressure, and you're under pressure because you are working with a human life. One wrong decision, one wrong assessment can have an impact on that individual.
Right. A very important role in the community, obviously, very, very important work. And I can just imagine also quite stressful and a lot of pressure. Like you were saying, you have somebody's whole life in your hands and you want to make the right call and the right decision for them and their care. So you're a mom of two, you're a wife, you're working in healthcare. And I love your description that you say, I was just doing. And it almost reminds me of like you kind of go through the motions and sometimes you look at the end of the day and maybe listeners can relate to this where you go, I just kind of did the thing, right? I glided through it. And then the next day is the next day. Let's do it all over again. Did it kind of feel like that?
Oh, 100%. 100%. Because at the same time, being a mom as well, my son, who's 19 now, but he got diagnosed with autism and ADHD when he was 5 years old. And
Okay.
that's something else that I was having to manage and deal with in a way as well, because I knew he was presenting with some of those patterns and behaviors, but it took a while before we even managed to get him seen, assessed. And then it's the whole the whole process of how he's functioning in an education environment, how he's functioning at home. So for me, the caring role never stopped.
Yes. Right.
And that is where I really felt the pressure. And I remember at times feeling guilt, and also I'd say a lot of guilt, because I'm like, I felt exhausted, that I was just caring, 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 caring. And what I hadn't realized was obviously there was so much of the doing and the caring for others, but depletion and uncaring for myself that was going on.
Hmm. I think a lot of people and a lot of moms can relate to that, right? You put everybody else first above yourself. And then on top of that, you're working in healthcare. So that's literally what you're doing all day, every day. So I'm assuming where this is going is that it came to a head at some point.
It did. It really did.
Okay.
And do you know, the interesting thing is, I went through a couple of years where I kept having health issues, but
Okay.
I still didn't realize that there was something beyond just it's a health issue going on, starting
Right.
with the exhaustion first, then the low mood, then feeling frustrated, irritable, like, kind of like you don't want to be around people. And then you'd start having, I used to have like a lot of sore throats. I was constantly like on antibiotics, and then headaches, migraines, and then on those medication. But it got to a head when I would say I'd completely hit rock bottom. And the doctor
Okay.
said, but all your bloods are fine. And I'm like, what's wrong with me?
And what do you mean by rock bottom? Can you describe that?
Rock bottom really was like, I don't feel anything at any point. I just felt constant anger. I couldn't feel anything else. I lost that zest for life. I felt I was going to work, doing my work because I was so good at it, but I wasn't feeling anything. I just felt like this, I call it like the empty vessel, like this skeleton that's moving around, but nobody's home.
Wow.
Mood had dropped significantly. Like I was not home. Once I'd come home, I wouldn't interact with anybody. I would then struggle with interacting with my son, who wasn't even verbal at that time. So he needed so much more support. And only I was the one who was able to understand his nonverbal cues. So, you know, it was like all of that was going on. But also at the same time, then that carried on and off. And I was seen, and, they'd be like, yep, you're going through depression. And I'm like, okay. So I'd get seen by a counselor, take some antidepressants. Then I'm like, okay, I feel good. Start to get that feeling of life again, that motivation back again. But then again, something else would wipe me out from a physical health problem. Then it was like so chronic anemia is something I had since young. So, low iron levels. And then it was that whole cycle. And then they're like, oh, but you're vegetarian. So, and I'm like, why is my body not absorbing? I'm eating all the right stuff. I'm drinking the right stuff. I'm taking the right vitamins. Body's not absorbing.
Mm.
And then it really came to a head around 2017, and I was on holiday. And just before going on holiday is when the doctors had said, oh, your bloods are all fine. And I was like, but I feel exhausted. What's wrong with me? And you question it. You think you're going mad because you're like, but why do I feel exhausted? Why do I constantly feel like I'm eating, I'm sleeping, but I have no energy for anything? What's going on?
Mm.
But the worst thing was even the thinking, like your ability to think was like, I would question, I started doubting my memory.
Right. Did you have that like brain fog
Yeah,
too? So it
it
just
was
kind of
brain
felt
fog,
like dull. Mhm.
so dull, And I was like, but I'm only in my early 30s. At that point, I'm like, what's going on? But then we went on holiday, and it was at one point where we were in a restaurant, and my daughter, she was only 6 at that time, and she did something, so she hurt herself, and, I took her to the bathroom, got her sorted. As I was walking out of the bathroom, I started to feel really faint, really dizzy. And before I even could say anything to anyone or ask for anything, I collapsed. I collapsed on the floor on the restaurant, and my daughter thought I was dead. And she screamed the whole restaurant down saying, Mummy's dead. And apparently I was out for quite some time. They could not rouse me. This is like a buffet style restaurant. So you can imagine it's just full of people.
Right.
There was a doctor there who he was on holiday, but attended to me. Apparently they were like slapping my face so much, everything, but they just couldn't rouse me. It took quite a while to get me around. And then when I came round, all I see is everyone surrounding me. And I could hear my daughter crying, and she wasn't even near me. The staff had taken her upstairs, and I could still hear her.
Whoa.
And because she was upset, she was crying. And I just, that feeling of embarrassment, that feeling of shame, all these feelings coming through. And I'm like, what's going on? And I remember my husband was there. Held on to him. My son was there. He doesn't know what's going on because for him, processing everything that had gone on was quite a lot. And I got seen to, I got checked. I remember when I got back to the hotel, the day after, I just stayed in the room, just literally, but I really went into this whole mode of, who am I? Who am I? What have I done to myself? What's happened here? Because there's something that's gone wrong, very wrong. And if the doctors are saying everything's fine, then I need to know what's really going on.
Mhm.
Because people don't just collapse for the sake of collapsing.
No.
right?
Yeah.
And that's when, my whole journey kick-started with the question, who am I? Because for me to see my daughter feel so traumatized and like even through the night, not sleeping, checking that I'm okay and I'm breathing, I thought, I can't do this to her. And I was like, I don't want this for her. She's a woman. She's going to turn into a woman. This is not what I want to show her as a role model. And at that point, I just went through this whole phase of, I know I need to help myself, but I don't know how.
Right.
Because medically, for them, everything was fine.
Right. Which is, I think, can be so frustrating for people, right? Like I can feel it from you. And then also I just know people as well where it's like, it's almost a relief when you get the diagnosis or they find something or they pick up something, because then it's like, okay, we know the answer. We can treat that thing. But when they're like, I don't know, everything looks good, you should be fine. Meanwhile, you're collapsing on vacation. Like, no, it's not fine. Okay, there's something deeper here. It's interesting that you say, and this is very common from a lot of the people that I interview, is it starts with a question. It starts with that asking of what's going on, what
Hmm.
happened. So I think that's really cool that you actually ask yourself, like, who am I? What is going on here?
Yeah,
So what do you do in that state? Like I can only imagine it's helpless.
very helpless. You feel helpless, but you also then feel hopeless at the same time, which you wouldn't at that point think it. But when you reflect back on it, you're like, wow, because I feel as humans, and this is very much the human psychology as well, like we always look for something as an anchor to anchor ourselves in for that kind of safety, for that stability. And a lot of people, for example, you look at physical health. As soon as you're like, yeah, I feel physically healthy, that becomes your anchor. But as soon as you're physically healthy, for example, but something goes wrong, it's kind of like you've lost that anchor and you think, hang on, what's going on? So physically, or shall I say systemically, from a medical term, everything was okay. Well, what's going on? And where do you start? Where do you
Where do you
begin?
start? Right.
You know,
Because the medical system isn't helping me. So where do I go?
yeah. And the only help I would get from them is take some painkillers, take some this. And I'm like, for what? Because I want to try and understand what's really going on. And I
Mm,
remember, because I was navigating through quite a few chronic health issues. If I was to look at historically the amount of pills or medication that I used to take, and what I found was, hang on, I'm taking this medication for this, but that medication has now created this symptom. So now I've got to take another medication to solve that. I realized that there was this whole, what I call the domino or Jenga effect, where it's like for
mm-hmm.
one, you have another, for another, you have another. And I thought, no, this is not sustainable for me. This is not how I want my life to be. At that point, I was like, I'm young. I'm in my 30s. I want to enjoy life. The biggest thing at that point I remember saying, I just want energy to be able to live my life, to be able to have time to go and play with my kids. Because my diary was literally filled with how many days that were well for me to go out and spend time with my kids and enjoy, like when we had glorious days, weather. Otherwise, it was always sick, in bed, or in hospital.
What percentage of the time? Like, was it some days you were good and some days you were not? Or was it consistently like just not well? How did that fluctuate?
I would literally say 80% not well, 20% good.
So you'd have some good days.
Yeah.
Okay.
But even the 80% not well was me pushing through it, which led me to having this complete rock bottom.
Because do you feel like the earlier symptoms were almost warning signs?
Oh, 100%.
Yeah. And it's like not getting to the root of it. And so then it goes to the extreme. the passing out.
Yes, because when I look back at it now, it's very much like when we look at emotional burnout, for example, there's so many different stages to emotional burnout. I had literally gone towards the end of that stage where the body's just like, can't do it anymore. I have to shut down so that you would actually stop, because I used to push myself through everything.
Right. That's very, very relatable. Again, as any overachiever, many parents know, like, you get up, you show up, you don't have any other choice, and you make it happen. And especially if you're also, like, even if you don't have kids or you don't necessarily work in healthcare, but you're that person in the group that always has your shit together. You always have been. You're the rock. You're the person that people lean on. That can get exhausting too, because everybody expects you to just always be the person to show up and to show up a certain way. So I think that your story, even though it is quite unique, I think a lot of people can find resonance in it, in giving, giving,
Yes.
giving. And also not only that, but also having these physical ailments and not really sure where they're coming from and the roots. So you're in this place where you're asking these questions. Where do you go from there? What happens next?
Do you know, I remember at that point where I'm just like, okay, I need to find somebody who can support with healing. And I knew of one person local to me who was doing energy healing. And I was like, okay, that's where I'm going to start, because I really didn't know anything else. And I would say, in a way, it's a blessing that people can now just turn to internet to find so many different, modalities or people or different things out there. But at that time, you couldn't find all of this so easily. So of course I was being referred and I started to have counseling, but I felt that there was something deeper that I needed, because I can talk about the stuff, but for me, it was more about nobody's listening to me. You can talk about the situation or the symptoms or whatever, but I was missing that element of somebody really truly seeing me and hearing
Mm,
me,
mhm.
you know? And again, when you just mentioned about being the strong one who everyone goes to, that literally was me as well. So for
Mm,
me, even at that point, I found that I was being composed, because it was like, well, I have to show up in this way. I'm a professional. I'm a mom who has a child who has needs. I've got my shit together. you know, I'm a
right.
I'm a wife, and it was like everybody would message me, phone me, oh, Chin, what can we do for this? What? So I was there for everything. So the overgiving had just completely had depleted. So that's when I started with my journey of the whole inner discovery, the self-discovery. So energy healing is where I started.
And before the energy healing, did you have a spiritual background or a religious background, something that made you go, oh, I'm interested or I'm curious about that? Or was it like, okay, the medical system has only taken me so far. I can't go any further. Why not try this woo woo shit? Like, where, you know what I mean? Like, what was your background and how
Yeah.
did you end up at a healer?
So I was actually born and raised in Africa, in Kenya. So I lived at least 12 years of my life there and most of my childhood there. And I grew up in a household where, we're of faith, and spirituality was something that we practice. So I used to very often visit temples, visit what we call their satsangs, all those, kind of things. And I knew I was always connected to God. I always had that connection with God, but in my own way. And even as a child, I always used to feel energy, but I didn't realize at that point what that was. And interestingly enough, like, we used to have what we call the open house policy. Like, we would have community gatherings and, in our houses. But I realized that there were times when I used to energetically react to certain people's energy. So what I mean by that is, as a child, I'd be sick around certain people. And, that whole label of you've always been a sick child, was from a young age. But for me, I
Mm.
always knew that I had that connection with God. I always knew that that I used to do a lot of what we call our home healing. So using the herbs, like it's implementing the Ayurveda side of things. But, I used to just go into the garden and I'd pick some herbs and we'd make some concoctions and take this. So I always knew there was a different side to medicine. And I remember as a child, I always said, I always want to be somebody who helps others. I want to be like medicine woman, but not a doctor, you know?
Mm.
So I had that side of me, but of course, when I'd kind of moved from Africa to the UK, life was very different here for me. And I didn't have that level of community engagement. I didn't have that level of faith or spiritual connection and engagement, although I used to visit the temple, but the closeness that I had when I had, as a child, I didn't have it whilst I was in my teenage years and young adult. So
Right.
that's how, when I was just sitting and praying, I was like, okay, there was a knowing, but I didn't know it. Does that make sense? It's really hard
Mm-hmm.
to explain that sometimes. It's like, there is a knowing.
Some conscious level, there was this
Yes,
message or this knowing, and I look at that as intuition. Like your intuition,
100%.
there was something inside of you that was saying. And I think that's so interesting. You mean you did go into a helping field. You were the medicine woman, but I mean in the UK, you're going through the typical standard way of doing that, of helping people, of being the medicine woman, which is in the medical system.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So, but there is this background inside of you that's like, it doesn't have to be so medical. It can be, more natural, the Ayurvedic, the connection with source. Okay, so
Mm,
finding a healer wasn't necessarily out of left field, but it was new to you at that point to explore that.
yes.
So you
Yes.
get a referral for somebody had said, try this person.
No, I knew of a person and I just reached out to them. I just kind of went with it again, intuition, gut instinct. I just reached out to them and I said, I feel I could really benefit from some energy healing. And yeah, that's literally that's where it all started.
Okay, so walk us through that experience with the healer.
So it was very much based on Reiki energy healing. And the experience was, again, it felt known to a certain level, but in this physical essence, in this kind of side of things, I was like, like how does she know so much about me? Where's she picking this stuff up? But there was also a sense of relief that somebody was seeing me for who I truly am.
You're like, this is what I've been looking for in talk therapy.
Yeah, exactly, right?
Wow. Oh,
Um,
beautiful.
but it also felt very uneasy. It felt very like, oh my God, it felt like a can of worms being opened up, right? Because
Like
that's the
we're
journey.
unpacking this now.
Yeah, we're unpacking it. And that's where I started to then feel all sorts again. And boy, when I talk about emotions rising, when I talk about especially certain emotions that I knew I was already experiencing, like the frustration, the irritation, the anger, like they really doubled up and they tripled. And I was like, oh my God, I thought this was meant to help me. What's going on?
Okay. It was like coming to the surface, anything that you'd been suppressing.
Yeah, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And that's
Okay.
when I started to understand that, okay, this was literally, we were stirring this muddy pot where everything that was not hidden, but pushed down for years and years and years was starting to all come up, all come up. And as it all comes up, it comes into your conscious awareness. There's, oh my God, there's all these things. So it did feel quite overwhelming at first, especially when you are going in a way with blind faith is the best way to describe it, because you're like, okay, I know this is going to help me, but I don't know what Reiki is. I don't understand it, but I'm going in knowing that my intuition and my gut instinct is telling me to go for it. So I didn't question it. I just went in. So when you don't know it, it can feel quite overwhelming. But I started to then see the patterns. I started to understand it. But I suppose what had happened at that point through that journey was I was expecting everything to work quickly. And as the journey was going, I was on that journey. And then you're like 6 months down the line, then a year down the line, you're thinking, oh my God, there's still more, there's still more, there's still more. I started to realize that this is not a quick fix. This is not
Mm.
a quick fix. And I remember at one point I heard a voice, and all it said to me, and that's when I also knew it was real intuition, because it literally came and went, and it's like, you're here for deeper. You're here for something deeper, and you need to go deeper. And I was like, okay,
Mm.
don't know what that means, but God, I'm praying to you. You guide me and show me the path forward, which then led me on the path of healing and discovery and of the self, the inner work, the inner journey, but to a much deeper layer and a deeper
Hmm.
level.
So at this point, you've worked with the same healer for 6 months to a year, or were you exploring different modalities? What did that healing journey look like?
Yeah, so I worked with the existing healer. I had some one-to-one sessions, and then I actually trained. She attuned me to Reiki healing. And I started utilizing energy healing on myself on a day-to-day basis. But what I came across was I had questions that could not be answered. And that's where I started to feel more stuck. And I'm like, okay, I don't have an understanding of what's coming up for me. And I wanted to understand it. And I suppose this is where, I started to see and feel that where the gaps were in that journey for me. So it's not just about, okay, you go, you have your healing session and off you go. No, because what happens is things were uprooted. And when they're uprooted, you want somebody to be able to guide you through that. So that's when I went deeper into my prayers. And lo and behold, within like a few weeks of praying, I came across another um, local event where somebody said, oh, we're doing like a half-day retreat, and, it's all to do with XYZ. And I was like, okay. But just prior to that, what had happened was we all went through the pandemic. And as I was frontline staff, and as soon as it all kicked off, I ended up becoming quite unwell. And for 7 days, I was obviously isolated in my room. But those 7 days felt like, although it wasn't physically the best time, it felt like the most blissful time I had experienced. For those 7 days, all I kept seeing, sensing, and feeling is being in this white light energy. And I was just chanting. There was about 3 days I didn't sleep day and night. It's like somebody had pressed a play button in the brain, and I was just chanting constantly, but I was chanting with so much sincerity, so much love. Not that, oh my God, I'm sitting here not well and I can't breathe properly. I can't sit on the edge of the bed for even for 5 minutes, but I was chanting with just so much grace. And everyone's like, oh, why don't you watch this on Netflix? I said, I don't want to watch anything. I don't want no chocolate. I don't want no magazines. I don't want to watch anything. I
Mm.
was just embracing that disconnection time, but it was a real reconnection time for me. And that's when I actually experienced an out of body experience.
Oh, wow. And sorry, just before we get into the out of body, very curious about that. What were you chanting?
I was chanting the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. So it's basically a very powerful joyful mantra which helps you to connect with divinity, but also purifies your soul. It purifies your mind, but it also gives you that sense of joy and that sense of feeling of that bliss as well. So it's a very powerful Krishna consciousness mantra, which is really helping you to connect more to divinity and source. So I was just chanting constantly. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Okay. Beautiful. And so just instinctively you're chanting this for 3 days, not sleeping or
Yeah,
eating or anything?
no, no.
Okay. And you just feel surrounded by this white light. Can you describe how that felt? The white light.
I felt held. I felt, honestly, the word, like, I had the biggest smile on my face. So I would have video calls, with friends and family, and they're like, "Are you okay?" They're like, I was like, "Yeah, I'm fine." They were like, "You're really smiling." I was like, "Yeah, like I'm smiling because I feel really joyful. And they're like, "But you're not really well." I was like, "Yeah." But it literally was like my body was receiving healing on a different level. And there's a beautiful saying within, just shared in the Bhagavad Gita as well, that we are not the body, we are not the mind, we are beyond all of that. And literally that was like a true essence of knowing and feeling that, yes, that there is source, there's higher energies than us. We think we control everything, but we don't. But there was a higher energy that was actually coming through. So even with the food, like everyone's like, "Do you want to eat this? Do you want to eat that?" I said, "No." But what I do want, because I'd lost the sense of taste as well, but I said, my body wants more nourishment. And I said, all I want is some fresh juice. And I was so specific because I was receiving guidance. It has to be ginger. It has to be spinach. It has to be carrot and celery. And that's all I was having.
Okay.
Yeah.
When did you have the out of body experience?
During that same period of time, over those, especially, it was like a potent 3 days I was going through. At one point, I actually felt, and this was at nighttime, because I think initially I was getting a bit frustrated that I wasn't able to sleep. And I thought, well, how am I going to heal if I can't sleep? How am I going to recover if I'm not sleeping? But I had to let go of that. I was like, okay, I'm just going to let go. And I may have kind of gone into a small amount of kind of what we call the deep sleep. And there was at one point that I actually felt myself elevate out of my body and I was going up. And as I was looking down, I was like, my bed's down there. And I was going up, but I was on a different bed. It felt like a very white, fluffy couch that I was on. And I just feel the presence. And at that point, I saw, but not very clear. I kind of like just saw physical outline, but I felt the presence and I felt their hands on my chest and my body. And all I hear is, "It's not your time to come back. Your mission hasn't even started. Go back down." I was like, what?
Wow.
I was like, okay.
And was that telepathic communication? Uh-huh.
It was psychic connection. It was a psychic kind of, and bearing in mind that I didn't think that I was connected to that at that time. Now I know I was because I wasn't physically aware of it. But it literally was like this. I just heard, and it was a masculine voice. And he said it with an assertive tone, but with so much love. And they were all like, "We are here with you. This is the beginning of your mission now." And I was like, okay. And lo and behold, like my life shifted, changed from that year onwards. So after I came out of, the isolation, I was recovering. I remembered that voice came back, "You're here for deeper." And I was like, okay. So then what I started to do was I started to act upon that guidance that I was receiving. But I wouldn't always know what action is right. So I would just ask in prayers, I would just ask for the guidance and I'd be really specific. I'm like, you need to be really black and white with me when you're giving me the guidance so
Hmm.
that I know this is for me. And that's when I came across, it was like a life coaching certification. And they were doing 10 days. You can, just join us for free. We will guide you through different things. And I did all 10 days and I'm like, this has been giving me the answers that I was asking for when I started my healing journey. And then I was like, okay, so it's going to cost X amount. The investment was a big investment. And I was like, I don't have the funds. And then I was speaking to my husband about it. And he goes, he could see something in me that at that point I couldn't see in myself. And he said, don't worry. Here it is. You go and pay for it and do it. And I was like, oh, okay. So I did. And that journey continued for about another 6 to 9 months. That journey continued before, and then it was by the end of that whole year that I certified as a life coach and stuff as well. And then a voice again, you need to go deeper. And I was like, how deep? What does this mean? And I was like, okay, show me. And I said, I want you to guide me onto the right path for me, but I want you to guide me to somebody who doesn't just preach the work, but they actually walk the talk as well.
Mm.
And that's when I came across a very transformative energy healing modality that works on a subconscious level. And I was like, boom, this literally was the missing piece to the puzzle. As I started to work through that, I started to really reveal a lot of the patterns. I started to piece everything together where I was like, now I see what was going on when I was going through all the chronic health stuff and this and that. But I started to see where that was all coming from, whether it was ancestral, whether it was a past life, whether it was an inner child. And that's where I started to really heal on a deeper layer and a deeper level.
So you were seeing that there were different roots to what was playing out in your life. It wasn't just things that maybe you had experienced in your childhood or traumas or things like that. It was also some past life and some ancestral things that was carrying down the line for you.
100%.
So what is this modality that you stumbled upon?
It's called Theta Healing.
Theta?
Yeah, Theta
Like
Healing.
THETA?
ETA, yes.
Oh, so are you taking people in theta state? Like, is it kind of hypnotic?
So, yeah, we take people into the theta state, which is very much like your relaxed brainwave state. So it's based on, the different brainwaves. But the theta state, yes, so you do get hypnotherapists who use that state as well. But it's kind of like done slightly differently. In a generic term, yes, we go into that really relaxed kind of state where we're then connecting to the subconscious. So as I went through that, I then started to apply also my clinical expertise into the work that I was doing for myself. Because what I found was, hang on, this modality is great. It's giving you X, Y, Z, amazing. This energy healing modality or Reiki is great because it's giving you X, Y, Z. But then I was just finding that there were still little gaps. And then I started to meet all of these at an intersection where I was like, okay, what is it that I need to get myself back to my true self? Not the version that other people have given me, not the titles I've been given, not my name, not my roles, not my responsibilities, but who I am without all of that. Because I want to show up as that version of who I truly am without abandoning who I am. So I can still serve, I can still lead, I can still guide, I can still be a mom, I can still be whoever I had to be, but no longer abandoning myself and my needs. Because what everything had come round to was, I was this person, the strong one, holding it for everyone, being the one everyone would go to, amazing functioning at, a high, under pressure, high level. You can imagine in the hospital settings, I used to thrive working in accident and emergency, on the spot decisions. Now I'm like, I don't know how I did that. I really don't know how I did that.
Well, it made me a shell of a person, so that's how I somehow did it. It sounds like you got healing on a soul level.
Yeah. The healing happened
Mhm,
on a very deep soul level, very, very
mhm.
deep soul level.
So you're experiencing this and it's transforming you. Would you feel comfortable sharing personally what you discovered through this of like either the patterns that you were repeating or that hollow, that emptiness that you were feeling, where it rooted from, if it was a past life, if it was ancestral, if it was childhood, like if it was all of it? Can you give us a real world practical what that looked like for you and how understanding and seeing that clearly aided in your healing?
Yeah, absolutely. So the perfect example I can give, which I feel will relate to a lot of people, is the feeling of belonging, which is then linked to people pleasing.
Oh, girl, you're preaching to the choir. This is like this is meant for me. This is I know that I am here in this lifetime to learn and transcend that. This like need for external validation, approval, being in the group, people liking me, that type
Mm,
of thing. So go on.
ah,
I'm all
okay.
ears.
So this was a big one for me as well. It was huge. And what I realized was, going through my own journey, a lot of my health issues also was stemming from basically what I call the self abandonment. So, what I mean by that is, say, for example, I was feeling energetically tired, but a friend would be like, "Oh, I really need help with this, and I need you to help me heal this and this and that." Although I'm feeling tired, I've ignored myself and what my body needed, which would have been rest at that time. And I'm like, "Oh, okay, I'll do it. I'll go. I'll help you. I'll do this." And that was coming from a place of, well, if they see me doing this for them, they won't abandon me. They won't reject me. I'll be validated for who I am. I'll be the nice girl. I'll be the good girl. I had a complete distorted version and a distorted description of what it meant to be kind. I thought kindness was just give, 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 give. But in that process, I went through burnout. So how does one continue to be kind without burning themselves out? How does one continue to be kind with a healthy boundary? This is where I really had to learn to accept what I call the truth pill, which is very difficult to swallow, that we have to be okay with disappointing people. We have to be okay knowing that people are going to judge you. I used to go around constantly trying to prove myself and explain myself. If I find somebody had said something or somebody had a different perception of me, I'm like, no, no, no. But to a point, I'm like, why do I need to prove myself? What is this showing me? And it was all coming back to the same thing of, I didn't want to feel rejected. I didn't want to feel abandoned. I didn't want to feel alone.
Mhm.
The root was loneliness. But in that fear of being alone, I'd already lost myself. So the healing aspects, working through the root level, I understood where this was coming from. Yes, it was generational, especially through my mother's lineage. Women had to be givers all the time.
Yes.
Women had to show up for everybody, no matter what,
Mhm.
right? But the ancestral was there, but it's also a learned pattern because I observed my mum do it. It's like saying yes to everybody and no to yourself, because the moment you say no to somebody, you're going to be ousted, or you're going to be punished, or you're going to be rejected, or and then people are not going to like you. Then you're going to be by yourself. Then you're going to be a loner, right?
Yes.
And so I identified where the patterns were coming from, but it also took me to a past life where there was sisterhood betrayal. So it wasn't just ancestral. My soul remembered from a past life that I was betrayed within a sisterhood circle. And because of that, and that betrayal happened because I was speaking my truth. So at that time, I'd taken a vow that one would not speak her truth.
Right, because then the group is going to oust me. Like, I can't be honest with
Exactly.
the group and with myself. So you learned that.
Exactly.
Okay.
Right? So
Mm-hmm.
that's already imprinted.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that's already imprinted in you. The ancestral stuff is imprinted in your DNA. And then you've got the learned behavior as a child that you've observed around your environment.
And all of this is subconscious. None of this is
Subconscious.
really conscious either. So sometimes we're just, where you were at, where you're experiencing all these health issues, feeling totally hollow and depleted and numb. Meanwhile, all this stuff is happening in the background, but we're just not conscious of it. Wow.
Exactly. Yeah. And the biggest, so in Vedic wisdom, these imprints are called samskaras. These are all the imprints that you have carried, whether it's from past life, whether it's from ancestral, and these are all the imprints that your body has coded within it. So even if in this life you wanted to say no to somebody, consciously you'd be like, oh yeah, I can say no to them. But come that situation, you'll say yes to them because your subconscious has already gone into a high alert that no, if you say no to them, then that's what's going to happen. If that happens, then they're going to kick you out. If they kick you out, you're going to be alone.
We're not doing that again. We already lived that life.
Exactly, right? So this is where you have to, I call, because it's one of the frameworks that I've created. It's what I call, we have to recode it. You have to recode everything because it's doable. So, this is one thing I always, and for me, when I came to that realization that, my God, I can actually untangle myself from all of this, I can clear myself and I can recode, I'm doing it. Because especially when it happens on an ancestral level, on a genetic level, I don't want to pass this on to my kids. I do not want to pass this on to my daughter, that's for sure.
Right.
So the buck stops here. We're going to clear that.
Yes.
But the biggest lesson out of all of that I was truly learning was detachment.
Like, I have to detach from that outcome of like how this person is going to perceive me. Like,
Exactly.
they're responsible for their own emotions. And if they choose to feel this or that and the other thing, I don't have control over that.
Exactly. And if that means that they walk away from you, then you've got to let go of that. If this means, and I have, because I'm very intuitive and I'm a psychic as well, I can pick up on thought forms. So I can tell when things are being spoken about me, but I'm literally at peace that if they're going to perceive me that way, that's beyond my control. As long as I know that I'm doing my actions are done with purity and integrity. Now, does that mean I get it right all the time? Of course not, because we're still human, right? But this is where we have to then also accept self-responsibility that, okay, actually, do you know what? Yeah, I could have done that better, or I could have dealt with that situation better. I own my hands up to that. But this is a whole journey about taking self-responsibility. And everything begins with us. Like, of course, I could sit there and blame my ancestors for a lot of stuff, but hey, you know what? They did the best they could. Because of them, I'm here today. And if I've got the power to heal through this, I'm doing it. I'm not going to sit here, just keep pointing my fingers at them, say, well, you did this and you did that. I can
Right.
heal myself. I can heal through this. And I can truly live the life that I want to live, being who
Mm-hmm.
I am with my own values, my own beliefs. So detachment, was a real big thing. It was a big virtue that I had to learn, and also boundaries.
Mm.
And actually learning how to say, thank you for thinking of me. At the moment, I don't have capacity, right? Or I'm honored that you have invited me, but it's not aligning with me right now. It's kind of like really being honest and knowing actually the people who truly care for you will be able to hold you in that space. Because one of the biggest things I had to learn and heal through for myself was not to take things personally. I used to take a lot of things personally. And I say that with so much vulnerability because that was a big thing, big part. And that's where the people pleasing was coming. And when I started to really see the truth behind all of that, because as you're unpacking it, you start to see where that's coming from.
Mm-hmm.
You start to realize that actually this was never you in the first place.
Right. Because just like you have to take responsibility for yourself, everybody does. And whether they choose to or not, that's up to them. But at the end of the day, we all have to take responsibility for ourselves. And it's easy to think everything is about us, right? The world
Yeah,
revolves around us.
absolutely.
But
Absolutely. And it's so important to also know that when we're on this journey, we're always evolving. This journey of the healing, the like what I call the personal development, all of that. I always say, don't get stuck in that you're not living your life. Learn how to balance both because it will complement each other. Because
mm,
this journey is never going to end until we
mhm,
transcend, right?
mhm, mhm,
So it's about allowing and learning how to allow life to flow through you. And, whether it's the highs, whether it's the lows, how are we holding ourselves within that chaos? How are we holding ourselves within those challenges? How are we holding ourselves within the uncertainty? Because everybody wants certainty, right? But we're going to go through stages where there's never going to be uncertainty.
mhm.
And this is where alignment to divine source energy becomes your real anchor. It's your faith where you learn how to surrender the outcomes.
Mm. And so when you're learning all of this and you're kind of unpacking and you're uncovering, are you seeing the fruits of your labor? Like you're feeling the transformation? Or is
Yes.
your outer reality shifting or changing? Are people noticing and being like, whoa, what happened to you? Walk us through that, what life looked like before. You walked us through that beautifully. But then after, so to speak, you've done a lot of that deep work.
Yeah. So when you first go through it, I know there were times where I'm like, do people even notice? Is anything going on? Like I could feel things were changing and shifting. But of course I really saw the shift and the transformation within what I call my own four walls. Like my home life became a lot more easier, like my communication with my husband, my kids, like we all have such open communication now. There's no treading on eggshells. Like I can express myself when I'm like feeling a little bit of a lower emotion, for example. I don't have to keep them guessing. I'm like, guys, I just need a bit of me time right now, just because I'm feeling a little bit sad or, I'm healing through something and I just need a bit of me time because I feel that it's a boundary, but also it's informing them that actually they haven't done anything wrong, you know? And I'm going to answer your question in two ways because in a way, it was really difficult initially for me to portray this version of me online in case my other professional colleagues would see me and they're like, oh my gosh, she's all gone woo woo.
When you started to actually do this for work and
Yeah.
help others? Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
Because it's like she's gone from like a clinical therapist into this. And I'm like, then I had to remind myself actually, your profession has always been a holistic profession, but you were just stuck in a medical model, you know? But it was still hard. I could feel the fear in me. Oh my God, what are they going to say? What are they going to, how are they going to perceive me? But then after I worked through it and I just started showing up, you know, I was like, it doesn't matter. But I have had so many people message me, and it's been really interesting and really heartwarming and refreshing to hear. They're like, we've been following your journey over the last 5 years. And they're like, it's so transformational to see where you are to where you are now and how you are confidently showing up, how you are, sharing your truth without having to worry about what somebody's going to say. But even from a professional point of view, I've noticed that so many other professionals are actually going down this route of the holistic, energy healing, different types, because everyone's identifying that there's a huge awakening going on. So everyone's kind of feeling this, hang on, there is more to life than what we're just seeing, you know? And I recently actually had, only last year, I remember a family member from my in-laws side, they were like, do you know what? We were so skeptical when you first started doing all of this. But he goes, now, he goes, I salute you. He goes, I rate you. And he goes, I want to know more about what you do. Because he goes, I have seen such a big, and he goes, your energy, everywhere you're walking into, your energy is just felt. Because it does, it shifts your aura, it shifts your field, it shifts your energetic field.
Right.
And the biggest thing for me has been, of course, I still face challenges in life. I still do. In fact, I'm going through a bit of another health challenge right now. But how I'm actually navigating through that is so different to how I would before. A friend I spoke to a couple of days ago, because she's in India at the moment, and she said to me, she goes, do you know what? She goes, you actually look so well and so good. She goes, I thought you were going to look really worse for wear. But she goes, I can really feel your faith, your energy, how you're handling the situation, because she knows what's going on. And she's like, wow, for somebody who's going through that, she goes, I thought you were going to be really like not great.
Hmm.
But what all of this has really taught me is how to actually know what I can let go of and only control what I can,
Hmm.
you know?
Yeah.
So they do notice it. And I do. So many have heard me say no now. I hardly, and people will say like, oh, we didn't see you at this event, didn't see you at that event. And I'm like, no. And I've realized I've stopped explaining myself. I've stopped justifying myself, which is a big
Hmm.
thing, because we would always find if we say a no, it has to come with because, or it would be like, oh, I'd love to, but now it's like a simple yes or a simple no, no justification given for it.
So then does that guide you to be like, oh, there's something here. I want to learn that. I want to learn that modality so I can help others.
Yes. So I did, and I've been working with that modality for the last 5 years, and now I'm a certified instructor as well. So I train others to certify in that modality as well. Honestly, it transitioned so naturally, because I got to a stage where I'm like, wow, if the work I've done on myself has transformed my life 360, I want others to be able to experience this.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not gatekeeping it. I want them to experience it, but I want to do it from a place of authenticity and truth. I always say this journey, it's not all rainbows and crystals. It's messy, it's raw. You will feel like you're going 10 steps forward, 20 steps backwards. But you know what? Having had met myself at the depth I've met myself, I know I can guide you on that journey. And it's kind of like a handhold. You walk that journey, but I'm just hand holding you for the times where you feel like you're needing a little bit of extra support, that I'm there to guide you through that. So I don't, I always say to people, I don't do surface level. And for me, it's truth over trends. It's not about trending modalities. It's not about trending spirituality. It's not about trending nothing. It's about actually what is the truth. And I want these transformations to be sustainable, because so many people are easy to go into the quick fixes. And don't get me wrong, I used to be one of those years ago. 2 years of quick fixes, I realized that I had to go back to square one to start
Mm.
again. because I missed the real essence of it. So the reality is it kind of just flowed in naturally. And I started getting people connecting with me saying, please, can you guide us with this? Can you help us with this? Can you? And there was this level that people would just open up to me about stuff they've never opened up to anyone about, not even their therapists. There was a sense of safety. They felt they were heard. They felt there was a non-judgmental space. And that's what led me into, this is literally my soul's calling. That's what led me into creating my own framework and guiding kind of like I tend to kind of work more with like the leaders and the professionals and the coaches. So I talk mainly about the health and wellness professionals where, again, they hold everyone, they hold everything great, but in the process have lost themselves. And some of them don't even realize it because they will call it, oh, because it's busy, we're tired. But actually that tiredness is the biggest indicator of you've disconnected from yourself, your true self. So, in that sense, I'm kind of like bringing them back to their inner stability, to that joy, to that freedom. So they can still show up and do what they want, but more from that whole self, not the depleted self, That's how the whole journey kind of unfolded and led me to what I do now.
That's incredible. So you emailed me in it, and your title is Root Level Transformation and Energetics Practitioner,
Yeah.
and the creator of the R.E.C.O.D.E method. So you work with people one-on-one on that. And you're my first across the pond guest. Most of my
Yay.
guests have been in North America. I'm in Canada. Most of my guests have been in the US, but you're the first in the UK. So exciting. So do you do work with people all over the world? Like, do you do it via Zoom and you can go online for our listeners if they're interested in working with you?
Yeah, absolutely. I work globally. So all my work is done, well, it's all done online. And of course, if you're local, you can. I actually do have a client who flies out to come and see me and do their sessions once every few months. It's just people's preference, but this work is so powerful that it works even via Zoom. I always say that, the work that I do is not bound by a physical time and space like we can work. So yeah, I do work across pond. One-to-ones I tend to do more of. I do host and facilitate in-person retreats, all that kind of stuff. But that tends to be whether it's in the UK or India at the moment. But otherwise, yeah, I work globally.
Incredible. Well, Chintal, thank you so much for coming on the podcast and explaining your story and what you've gone through. I do feel like a lot of people can resonate with where you were and the burnout and the people pleasing or the health ailments they're going through. How can people connect with you if they're eager to start on their healing journey?
You will find me on Instagram at The Sacred Haveli, or you can just drop me an email. And that's Chintal at thesacredhaveli.com. But I tend to hang out a lot more on Instagram. So just find me on there, DM me. I do offer a 30-minute, no obligation call. So it's always nice. I always like to get to kind of know people, know where they're at and, how I could support them. So that would be the best place to start.
Beautiful. We'll have it all linked in the show notes. Is there any parting wisdom you would like to leave with our listeners?
Stop looking outside of you. Start going inwards, because all the answers are actually there. You just have to sit with yourself and be honest with yourself and just go inwards. Once you work on your inner landscape, your external reality will completely shift.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. This has been such a fun conversation. I appreciate it.
Thank you. I've really enjoyed it as well. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for tuning in to Meant to Be Heard. If this episode resonated, please share it with a friend, rate the podcast, and hit follow so you never miss an episode. You can find us on Instagram and TikTok at You're Meant to Be Here with a 2. New episodes drop Mondays. Wherever you are on your spiritual journey, you're meant to be here.